Alright guys, welcome to the video to describe how to do the final part of your project. So, if you are finished with your plan for the Zentangle pattern project, you should have something like this. You have a spot where the skin was from your magazine that you probably took an X to, otherwise you left it blank because you're pretty smart. You guys know where to put your X's and where not to put them. So, this is where, on the final one, my magazine picture will be, and on the rest of the sides I have a bunch of patterns. So, now we need to take all these patterns and transfer them to our final piece of paper. Our final piece of paper is a little thicker than the one you're using right now. It's just going to look a lot nicer. So, there are two ways to transfer your patterns. One way is to use a light table. We have light tables on the side of the room. Otherwise, you can use just one of the windows in the back. There's plenty of light coming through there. You just take this paper first, you put it over your sketch, and then you put them over the window, and the light will shine through and you'll be able to see your patterns. So that's a really good way to copy the patterns. Otherwise, if the light tables are way too busy, you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, just copying what you've already done. To do that, you're going to get your blank piece of paper, you're going to line up your image as best you can, and this is why we kept the body in case people have to do this. You need to line up your image as best you can about where you had it. You want to put the body parts on there where they were. Line it up a little bit. And then what you would do is you would trace around the outside again. This part you would do with pencil because that's very important. Using pencil when you're not sure where your Sharpie is going to go is going to be very helpful. Alright, but I used the light table to transfer mine. So I transferred all of my designs from this one. And now I could call it quits. I have enough patterns. However, I do not have a lot of balance. As you may have noticed with this, the patterns are very light. There's not enough black in here. Also, if I did not have this in here, and even with this in here, it's hard to tell that this section is supposed to be her clothes compared to this side, which is the background. So I need to make some decisions. How do I want to distinguish the clothes from the background? I can make lines thicker here. I can make the background lighter and the clothes darker. I can make the clothes lighter and the background darker. It's totally up to you guys. So all of these patterns need a little more detail though to make them stand out. So I'm going to take my magazine picture and take that out of the way for a little while. As you may have noticed, I didn't trace it along here. Part of that is because I didn't want a big black line around the outside of my magazine picture. Totally up to you guys. Up to you and what your style preference is. So, I think I'm going to start by trying to balance these two sides. So right now they're fairly balanced, but we still need a little bit more darkness in here. So I am going to start with my hexagons here. Now I don't want to color in the hexagon, like the outside, and then leave the inside white. I feel like that takes away from the hexagons that are on the outside. So I'm going to color the hexagons that are on the inside. Now I'm going to use a scrap piece of paper. This is just the back of my plan. That's totally fine too. And I'm going to use that for the spots where I'm going off the edge of my paper. Now remember that Sharpies bleed, so you're going to have to be very careful not to linger too long, lest you ruin your pattern. Don't forget to take your time, guys. This isn't a race. This is, I want this to look good. I want this to get me a good grade. All that's very important. We would rather you took your time and got a good grade over rushing it. So, after I trace all these insides here, I'm going to move on to here. Now I feel like the lines that do not have dots in them should probably be black. The ones that do have dots, take the dots and color those in black to balance it out a little bit. And you may have noticed on here I had all these lines where I made to kind of distinguish where my patterns were. But to me those lines don't really look too good in the final project. To me something like this looks a lot better with all these kind of spikes merging into these spheres here. Along with here, just the spikes just ending before they get here. I think that looks a lot better than having just some straight lines separating everything. Totally up to you guys, because these lines might help emphasize your design a little more, and keep that in mind when you're making your patterns. You're trying to emphasize this person. As we keep going here. Now I won't bore you, I'm not going to color in everything, but I'm giving you an idea of why we choose to color in some of these patterns compared to just leaving them blank the way they are. Alright, so already looking at this side, you're seeing a lot more detail and a lot more distinguished patterns compared to on this side. Now, I feel like my background is going to have a lot of small details, and to separate that from the clothing, I have these huge big details in the clothing, so I feel like that's going to do a really good separation of it. I'm also going to thicken the lines on the clothing to differ them from the background here. So I'm going to go over these lines I made with a small Sharpie. So you can see that already I'm starting to see the difference between this and what's in the background. See, that looks really good. And it might help to take some of the pieces and kind of put them back over just to see where your patterns are. Now see, I already noticed that here some of my lines from my pattern are slacking a little bit, not doing their job. So I fill in the blanks that I'm seeing here. I want my patterns to come all the way to the side of her head. So that's something to keep in mind as you're working on your designs. Don't forget, tiny details look really, really good. Just adding just little minute things, just like little lines. It's going to look so much better. It's going to look like you put so much time into it, which is good because we want you to put time into it. Now remember, you want to create different types of lines. We're trying to create emphasis, but we're also trying to create both directional and expressive lines. Both are very important in artwork. So these lines that I'm currently making would probably be considered to be directional because they're very uniform in size. Now, I don't want you guys to think that you can just freehand this either. Do not underestimate the power of a ruler. So a ruler is going to really help when you're making a lot of those straight directional lines. So for example, I am creating one of the other designs I had on my sheet. I had a little bit of some kind of checkered pattern action going on here, so I want to add these details Those straight lines are going to make your directional lines look a lot better. Alright, I am going to continue on this.